Stephen Fry emerged from Cambridge footlights along with Emma Thompson, Hugh Laurie and other university wits. And today he reigns supreme as film star, television host, television guest, novelist, expert on English poetry and draftee don of a Cambridge college, where he gets frequent opportunities to remind his fellow dons that he still knows everything. Underneath it all, he suffers from clinical depression, perhaps just to make the rest of us feel better about knowing only something. When I first saw you in action, I thought, this guy is meant to be a don, and here he is fooling around on screen, and now, lo and behold, you are a don, aren't you?
Well, I am an honorary fellow of my college, that's true.
Which college is that?
It's Queen's College in Cambridge. And I have to say, yes, was it Churchill who said, was it young men sow wild oats and old men grow sage? And I had thought that I would probably spend my life growing tweed in a court or quad somewhere. Partly because I had sowed so many wild oats. I think that when I got to Cambridge and suddenly got the breath of the academic life and got a whiff of what used to be called the life of the mind, I was enchanted and glamorized by it in a way that I hadn't imagined I would be. I thought I'd be enchanted and glamorized by the young people who were my contemporaries and that I would be whisked off into their world of a mixed world of either high serious journalism, politics, or other such things. Instead, perhaps a little like you, I've always kept this very great belief and love of the high and the low simultaneously.
Because what I want to know now that you're back at High Table, which some would say you'll belong, what are you getting from them? I know what they're getting from you. I'm sure they ask you all the questions about show business. Whenever I've been at High Table, I get asked about film stars. There I am expecting to discuss atomic physics and Persian carpets.
I know. You're always looking in others for quite the opposite of what they're looking for in you. And I remember seeing this once at a cricket match when I saw Mick Jagger and Ian Botham sitting together, and both in their pomp. Well, Mick Jagger's still in his pomp, and Mick Jagger was talking about, I don't know why he doesn't bowl the arm ball and they give himself a short forward square, and Ian Botham was going about, so like, you're on a gig, okay, so how many girls come round afterwards? And you're thinking there's just no point at which they're ever going to want to talk about the same thing. Actually, almost my first memory of hearing Cambridge academics talking was when I'd gone up for an interview and I saw these two figures in gowns with their hands clasped behind their back in approved fashion, like in a print somewhere, looking like crows, walking through an archway. And I followed to hear what they were discussing, hoping it would be what Wittgenstein said to them once, or whatever it might be. And they said, no, it's made by a company called Knorr, spelled with a K, Knorr, and it's a sort of comminuted noodle substance, a hard pasta, and all you do is add boiling water, but I can assure you it's singularly toothsome. And I thought, well, there you are, you see, that's what academics talk about. But what I get out of the High Table at Queen's is that there's a marvellous tradition of people in different disciplines having a kind of wary view each of the other's art. And I like the fact that if a don seriously, absolutely, thoroughly disapproves of somebody almost in a moral, ideological, intellectual, every basis, they'll say, well, while Professor Judd and I have some points of disagreement, none yields to his genius like I. Whereas if there is a small issue, like whether or not a heated fruit pie is better than a cold fruit pie, they say, he's an imbecile, he's a dunderhead, he's a fool, he knows nothing.
Yeah. But I do relish the whole Donish world. It is a kind of tolerance, even when the odium theologicum is raging, even when they hate each other, there's still quite often a tolerance for human behaviour that can actually be extremely important. One of the things that the Dons put up with, I thought in an inspiring way, was us, the goof-offs, right? Yeah. Because if you went to Cambridge and you sort of started cutting lectures and not writing your papers because you're doing footlights and theatre and so on, instead of lining you up against a wall and shooting you, which they had the power to do, they could have rusticated you like Shelley. They didn't do that. And that was a rather plus, wasn't it?
It was, and I don't know how much it's still true today. I think it is in the old universities.
I hope so.
Because it's incredibly important.
It's important that universities should not be efficient. Is it not?
I think so entirely. I mean, there's a whole debate which in rhetoric is lost, but in practice, fortunately, isn't, which is quite a British thing. And that's to say that almost all political parties, certainly since the mid-70s, have gone on and on about how education essentially is almost indistinguishable from vocational training, which to you and me is a kind of anathema, I suspect. To us, it's a very different thing that we still, perhaps elitistly, perhaps sentimentally, in all kinds of ways, hark back to the idea of the seven liberal arts and the liberal education, the opening of a mind, the asking of questions, and if anything, the absolute non-fitness for purpose, to use that
non-utilitarian and doing things for their own sake, which is practically the definition of humanism.
Exactly is, both in science and in the arts, incidentally.
But definitely the university wits were kind of in charge, were they not?
They were, and someone, I think it was actually Simon Gray once said to me, a man with whom I had a spiky relationship over the past 10 or 12 years, but is a delightful fellow and very amusing.
You were in one of his plays, right?
I was, and then suddenly wasn't as well. But he said, of course, the only real advantage of going to Oxford or Cambridge is that you then don't have to deal with not having gone to them.
Yeah.
And I can fully understand that if I had not got into Cambridge and had gone to another university, my view of the kind of people who went to Oxford and Cambridge would be coloured, to say the least. I mean, I would probably want to use the W word.
In other words, what you're describing is a system.
Yeah, and I would see it as a cosy one. I would see it as a kind of a cosy nostra, as it's been called, as you know, the Cambridge Mafia, the Oxbridge Mafia, all the different words that come for it, and it looks like it. All I can say is you feel the opposite at the time, at least I did. I would go into the Footlights Club room and I'd see pictures of John Cleese and Peter Cook and yourself and Germaine Greer and Douglas Adams and Griff Rhys-Jones, who was a few years before me, and Clive Anderson, who was before me. And I'd see this past panoply, this pantheon of great comic talents and think, well, the door's shut after them. It's never going to happen again. And every time you're at Cambridge, almost the first thing you hear when you arrive is, apparently the Footlights are crap this year.
Yeah, that's exactly.
You know? And so we thought, oh, we'll be crap.
Well, that's the description of a tradition. It was always better. But there's no doubt that when people like Victoria Wood came along, things certainly started to expand in television and radio and so on.
Yeah.
Which was a good thing, I think.
Oh, no question. I mean, no one wants to see anything but the talent getting through. I mean, nobody wants to see a world in which people have only got the job because where they went to school.
So what you're seeing is a big social change. I want to nail this down because I want to talk to you about British society and how you, in many ways, mirror part of it and can criticise the rest and so on. And but there's definitely been a big change going on, and the idea of the gent is gradually having less force. And you, in many ways, epitomise the gent. You're a rogue gent, aren't you? You're not a bright yob. You're a rogue gent.
I am, and I am shamefully a member of exclusive clubs, many of whom people haven't even heard of. They're so exclusive, and they have the odd. As one club I'm a member of, where all the club servants are called Charles because the members, it's hundreds of years old and members have never bothered to learn the names. And you literally hear a conversation as somebody comes in, patting the sides of their pockets as well-bred people do all the time. They sort of do this a lot, I don't know why, and saying, hello, Charles, where's Charles? And they go, oh, Charles couldn't come in today, so Charles asked me to take over. Oh, fair enough. Well, if you see him, tell him that I saw Charles earlier and that he wished him well as well. You know, and
how does the Prince of Wales take it when he comes in?
That's a very good point.
You're not a Russian spy. You never were.
It was a huge sadness to me that I don't think I was ever approached.
I'm surprised you weren't approached for MI5. Were you?
I'm not sure if I was. I did. I got invited to all kinds of odd things. Odd, you know, have a glass of ratafia.
I know these things.
A glass of ratafia, they would say. And
being sized up by mystery men.
Or a stranger, do you like Sethial or Bual Madeira? And you think, is that the test? If I don't really know the difference between Sethial and Bual Madeira, am I going to prove inadequate to serving my country? Or is it merely he's actually trying to stroke my thigh, which is unlikely? You never know, you see, when an old man says, I want you to come and see me in my rooms. I'd like to get to know you better. You don't quite know what's going on.
Whether he's going to send you off on a mission to
because the other thing is the marvellous tradition of wild gay practices amongst dons. There was an extraordinary figure. I don't want to narrow him down to, but he was an academic.
Make him identifiable. Is he alive now?
I think he may still be. He's pretty old, but he was there was a very grand dinner in one of the older colleges, and he was boasting of some conquest, some Corvo-like conquest in Venice that he had made. And he said, my dear, I'm proud to say he was a true gondolier. And he had, he had the most enormous, and a colleague servant walked in. And so he said, C-O-C-K.
Superb.
It's just phenomenal snobbery, this idea that because he served wine, you wouldn't be able to work out what C-O-C-K spelled. I love that.
I was thinking when I was watching Gosford Park, it's a terrific movie, I said, what is going on here? Well, one of the things that's going on here is that Britain is being used to entertain America. It's a charade. The whole thing. Brilliant, cleverly organised charade. Do you feel that in Britain, some way Britain has a very high cachet in America at the moment?
It does. It does. And I think we're as guilty as they are. We are and have been, if you're to believe a historian, probably since the 15th century, we've been primarily a middle-class country. You know, we have that Northern European burgomaster kind of identity and character. But it's the one part of
my experience, historians always say this when they're actually being a guest in a country house. If I believe all magnificent. Sorry, I interrupted you. True. They're usually in Castle Howard or something. Or
middle class we are.
Yes, always been a middle-class country. Charles, more port. Yes. Anyway, onward.
But we've never been interested in our middle classes. Yes. We deprecate them at best and scorn them, frankly, at worst. And most of us are actually secretly members of them. We like to distance ourselves from it. We say, well, actually, I'm bohemian. I'm a perpetual student. I'm déclassé in some way. But when it comes to drama and novels, films, we like to look at either the upper class or the lower class. We either like a damn good, Edward Bond thing of babies being thrown out of council flat windows.
Still true. Proletariat literature is still the missing element, even after.
Yeah, and maybe it's only in drama that we've had. There was a period where the cut would rise on a Hampstead book-lined study or a.
So why are the Yanks so interested and thrilled in what they haven't got and don't need?
One of the things we can't do. I don't know if this answers the question. One of the things British actors seem not to be able to do is to play what Americans call an ordinary Joe.
Yes.
You can't picture almost any of your favourite British actors, I should imagine, playing like this guy. He gets up, he drives his car, he drives along a motorway or a freeway or even an ordinary city street, and he goes into an office. Somehow you want to know his social context if he's British. Where did he go to school?
Yes.
What sort of person? What does he know? Is he, in America, it could be a Tom Cruise part, it could be a Johnny Depp part, whatever, and he's like this guy, and they accept that. And I think they miss what we miss. We miss having an ordinary guy. Britons can't be ordinary guys. It was J.G. Ballard who wrote a very good essay about British cinema being hopeless because the moment you put a camera somewhere, you wanted to know what comment it was making about what it was looking at in Britain, whereas in America it doesn't. A shot of a high-rise development in Chicago where people live is not a commentary on urban blight. In Britain, it's an Antonia Bird moment where you say Thatcher's Britain, Blair's Britain, or you say, "Oh, look at that! It's lovely. It's Tower Bridge. It's followed by Buckingham Palace, and it's heritage Britain." But we don't have much in between. I think Americans rather like the idea of this place in Aspic that they, as it were, have left behind. Even if their surname is Koborowski, they still call it the old country, and they admire what they see as, I think perhaps to some extent correctly, what they see as the different relationship we have with language. I mean, we use words in a different way. I don't know that we think any quicker than Americans. I'm sure we don't.
This is providential, because I would have steered you towards this, because recently you were in the press for allegedly. In fact, let me hasten to say that I think you're much more right than wrong. I think there are some things that American actors do wonderfully, including speech.
Yes.
But you were saying that British actors were on the whole being overrated, especially when they played villains, simply because they handled the language so well. And that was to underrate American actors who actually handle it very well indeed, but don't sound as if they're doing so.
Exactly. And I didn't actually say I thought we did, that Americans were fooled. I just said is there a chance that they are?
You put your head
it's
right.
worth looking at it. I put my head
you
way
put your
above.
head right on the block.
I did. But
that's okay. No, I think you're making a valid point. I get into trouble for making the same point all the time. I say it more rudely and say that British actors, there won't be a British actor who can play the character like Andy Sipowicz NYPD Blue. It's not going to happen. The British equivalent is a bald-headed guy who sounds as if he's been ramming his head against a pub wall for 10 years, who actually mugs with his voice as well as his face. I don't think we've got people who can do that.
And actually, often Americans are more daring. We accuse them of, as actors, somehow having a kind of vanity where they can't play anybody unpleasant. But if you look at someone like, Toby Ziegler in The West Wing. His affect is constantly morose and unpleasant, and yet the affection you feel for him, and it's you bring that to him. He apparently doesn't ask to be loved, ask to be liked, ask to be admired.
There's no annotation on it of I'm really charming.
And how do I know so much about him? How do I know about his integrity? How do I almost know about his childhood? Just from the way he stands there looking glum with a cup of coffee in his hand.
And in The West Wing, let's stay on The West Wing, the clever are unashamedly clever at high speed, to the point where you and I we
couldn't come close.
Can't barely understand them.
Oh, that's right.
I have to ask my daughters what did Donna just say. So in many ways the Yanks are miles ahead. So there's something else they're after. I think they're probably after a structured, what they see as a structured hieratic society, and paradoxically, ironically, as they would say, they've chosen the very moment when it's actually disappearing from Britain.
Yes, and also paradoxically, of course, they have it to a much greater degree than we do. Not everywhere, but in the big cities, if you want to feel like a kind of modern-day Bertie Wooster, a kind of pampered person who's called Sir a lot, go to America, don't go to London. Don't go to Mayfair, don't go to the Ritz, don't go to the Savoy. Go to an Upper East Side New York place and see the white-gloved servants.
Anywhere between 70th and 80th Street on the East Side.
Absolutely, that's right. Yeah, between Madison and Park and Lexington, around that area.
Because you'll meet Charles in every...
You won't be able to get in a lift without someone opening the lift for you, carrying your parcels. And as an Englishman, you'll feel embarrassed because you won't know... How do I do this? Do I tip him? We're actually hopeless. We don't know what it's like to have.
But the guy who does that for you won't resent you and won't be selling his memoirs.
Exactly.
It's resentments that's missing because anybody can do it. Anybody who can get the money can have it. Incidentally, I would be jealous of Hugh Laurie's salary, but then on the other hand, I understand, as you understand, that one of the conditions of giving him that much money is they never give him any time to spend it.
Yes, so right. And I'm not jealous of him. I'm proud of him. I love him. He's my best friend, and I'm so thrilled. He's finally been regarded as the wonderful actor I always knew he was.
The price is to work for 6-7 days a week.
I've seen him. Yeah, the television thing I did was literally the set next door to his on the Fox lot in LA, and I've stayed at his apartment many times, and I see what he...
Eddie Izzard's doing exactly the same thing now. Yeah. And he's disappearing into this series. His life is going into it. Do you have any urge to do that?
Not at all. They actually asked me very sweetly if I would do a whole series of this thing I guested on. Because I did one, and then they asked for another 2, and then I said, could I do the rest of the series? And then would I be interested in doing the series next year? And I'm not saying I would have reached anything like the heights that Hugh did anyway, partly because I'm not as good looking as Hugh, and he's just aside from the talent. No, let's be honest.
Let's not get into aesthetic argument.
But I just seen what it's done to him. I'm not giving gospel away about it having done something terrible to him, but by any means, I just see how hard the work is. I mean, he's far too gracious to complain about it, because after all, you can't complain. They throw that much money at you, and you then complain. People think you're a complete, graceless imp.
Well, the whole bunch of you overwork. Emma overworks. She always has.
She does, yeah. It's a bit like, was it Lee Trevino, was it Gary Player? It's variously attributed. When he was driving off the tee once, and someone from the crowd behind said, "God, you're lucky to have a swing like that." And he said, "Yeah, it's crazy. The more I practice, the luckier I get." Yeah. And people don't want to know that.
No, they don't.
And now never more so in our culture. If you tell someone, yes, I can tell you where the Golden Palace is, and I can tell you how to get there. It's a very long, hard climb, though. And you will blister your knees, and you will hurt yourself, and you will fall down and have to start climbing again. They go, "Oh, in that case, I don't want it." But you're so lucky to get there. Well, and I'm not saying I've got to the Golden Palace, but all I'm saying is what attributes I have are ones that I've worked at and run towards with enthusiasm, and people now seem to think not only that it's unfair, but that it's their right to be given it without making the same journey. And that'll never happen on this earth. And I liken it to gold in that sense, that gold exists. It is real. I've held it, and I've got the odd thing made of it. Very, very little, but the odd thing. I know it exists, and I also know that the only way to get it is to know a huge amount about geology and about quartz and about mother lodes and then to get down and either yourself personally, if you imagine yourself as a prospector, panning for it and doing the whole Walter Houston thing with Humphrey Bogart, looking for it, breaking your bones in your body and then boiling your skin as you smelt it, and then gold will come.
And you also better know...
And it's real. But one thing that will never happen on this earth, I swear to you, it will never happen, is that an angel will come down and lean out from heaven and hand it to you. That won't happen.
Well, when it does, it'll be fool's gold.
It will certainly
varieties, which you've got to learn to recognise that too.
Fool's gold, as Walter would say.
You've got to learn to spot the fake.
I'm not ever going to say I've been unlucky in life, because absolutely I haven't. I've been lucky to have the parents I've had. I've been lucky to have the friends I've had. I've been lucky in all kinds of directions. But in the end, the fulfillment, if any, you get out of life, and that varies. Some days you do genuinely feel fulfilled by the things you're doing or the social situations you're in. That comes from certainly not from anything that you can call yourself lucky for. Because in a sense you would never feel fulfilled at something you were given.
Where does the depression come from? I know you've got it.
I would say that's a bit like saying, why is it raining? It's out of my control. It is raining, though. That's the thing you have to be so clear about. And it's taken me a very long time to understand it, despite some fine writers, William Starr and various others, writing superbly on the subject of depression. And you kind of think, yeah, but it's different from me, It's so...
Yes.
If it rains, most people know that doesn't mean they have to build an ark. That the sun will come out tomorrow, as Annie would say, or if not tomorrow, the day after. Yeah. But if it rains inside your head, almost by definition, that means it's telling you that it's never ever going to be sunny again in your head. That the very nature of depression is that it gives you a sense of the permanent uselessness of your life.
There's not a mechanism in your head that's saying, well, this has been over before, it'll be over again.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
This thing about depression being so total, so childlike, it ties up with my own theory about impulses in the mind. I don't know what my theory is worth, but I do know, I'm fairly sure that there's one creative impulse. It's as powerful and strong and simple as it is in a child, but it applies to everything.
But I've never had anyone interested in the odd thing that we have, as far as I know, above all other animals, which is this capacity for wonder. Yes. That the world we're built in and live in is the only world we will ever know. As far as we can tell, animals take it for granted, more or less.
They don't care.
They don't care.
And machines don't care.
They certainly don't go, wow, look at that sunset.
Yeah.
But we really do, and yet a sunset's all we know.
In fact, they've been genetically selected not to say, wow, look at that sunset, because if they do that, they're standing still, and that makes them
very often
vulnerable.
Yes, yes. But a lot of animals, tree frogs and things, have plenty of downtime, as you might say, in which to admire the universe. But they appear not to. Yeah. They appear not to be startled by it. We're not only wonder, but we are startled by it, and we're startled by our own creation. I remember the first time I went to New York. And like most people, I stood in one of the great canyons of, the Avenue of the Americas or Fifth Avenue or whatever, and I went, God, look at that. And yet, for 16 years, I'd seen nothing but photographs of this.
Yes.
And actually, if it had been stumpy little strange buildings, half-timbered German buildings, like, the old town of Mainz or something, then I should have gone, wow, I thought it was going to be all tall. Yeah. It was exactly what I knew it would be, but it amazed me. And the landscape is exactly what I know it's going to be, but it amazes me. And beauty is exactly sort of what I know it's going to be, but it amazes me. I find the very fact that I find things wonderful, I find wonderful.
Have you got a project coming up where you cross America by some means of transport? I was reading about a fleeting. Someone's crossing America. I was on Highway 66. Stephen Fry.
It is. I've always had a fascination for America, and one of the things that really interests me about it is not the America that I get to see most of the time. That's to say, Los Angeles, New York, where I had an apartment for some years, and San Francisco and Chicago, but the bits in between. And
which the Americans who live in New York and Los Angeles, I've heard them call it the flyover.
The flyover, exactly. That's right. They do. They have other strange words like boondocks and things that they use.
So you haven't actually done...
No, I'm starting in October. I'm going to visit every single one
means of transport?
Of the 50 states.
Really?
Yeah, every one. Because that really, America is...
That's Hawaii and
it's
Alaska.
It's called the United States of America, and how united they are.
One of the things that makes it ungovernable, it's too big.
Exactly. Yeah. And one of the things that makes it not what you see on either drama or on the news is that someone living in Oregon is an Oregonian, much more than they are an American, really.
And full of people who are quite likely to vote the other way from you and your friends.
Again, it's one of the paradoxes of America. They're so much more old-fashioned than we are. Yeah. We're a very Republican place, England. We believe in the, we believe in the sovereignty of our own self and our own opinion. We have a John Bull sort of, or if it's more benign, a Pickwickian sense of, I'm as good as the next chap, and the next chap's as good as me, and we're all equal. It's a very British way of looking at things. America has a class system, and they believe in the primacy of money and of hierarchies, and they actually believe in believing in things, which we don't. Yeah. We're very sceptical people. If you wanted to define the English character in a more intellectual way, I would say we are an empirical people. Yes. Our greatest gift to Europe and to the intellectual thrust of the last 400 or 500 years has been empiricism. It's how Newton beat Pascal, if you like, how he was right. Yeah. The French are rationalists. We're not. And we distrust rationalism and superstition as being two wings of the same heresy.
And that's why we've got an established church in which nobody believes.
Exactly. Because we don't believe in things because we test things.
But you still want an established church.
We still want it.
Somewhere to go to get married, somewhere to go when you croak.
Yeah. In America, they really have a religious idea about liberty. They believe it to be a thing that I still don't understand, and it's one of the things I want to understand on this tour.
Well, there's such a thing as fetishizing it. There's an article in the Constitution that fetishizes the right to bear arms.
I think we have, as I say, this rather more, tested. Does that work or doesn't it? Whereas to them, everything stands or falls, firstly, by the Constitution, and the Constitution pushes liberty up very high. So freedom of speech becomes more important than justice, which to us is preposterous. Because for us, being just to people is the first end, if you like, of a state, is for it to be a just state. And anyway, not for it to be a free state, but a just state. And freedom is quite a good way of getting there.
And anyway, freedom of speech is a concept, and justice is concrete.
Exactly. That's where empiricism, and in a sense, that part of the Greeks that was empirical, even the earliest philosophers, Zeno, the ones they call the pre-Socratic still.
Zeno was the paradox man, wasn't he?
If you remember, one of Zeno's paradoxes also was the paradox of the heap, the beans. Yeah. He handed a bean to one of his students and said, "Is that a heap?" And his student said, "No." He put another one there and said, "Is that a heap?" And he said, "No, that's not a heap." And he added another one and said, "Is that a heap?" No. And eventually, of course, kept adding a bean and said, "Yeah, that's a heap." He said, so a heap is 23. And the student thought, that can't really be right, can it? If I take one away, it's no longer a heap. If I add one, it is a heap. But we constantly have this. We have it with ages of consent, with abortion. Yes. These are things. Take one day, it's murder. Add a day. Take one day away, it's before their 16th birthday, it's child abuse. Add a day, that 16-year-old is an abuser. Yeah. Does that make sense? Ethics is very much to do with empiricism in that sense of actually testing it. And the right to bear arms is a good example. So where do you stop? What counts as arms? Even the most zealous interpreter of the Constitution wouldn't count a nuclear weapon as arms, but it's arms. But you're not you stop where?
We've got to stop, but I hope it's only a matter of days before we start again. Stephen Fry, thank you very much.
Thank you, Clive.
This brand new series continues next Wednesday at 7:30. Next tonight, though, The Art of the Heist.